What's going on, growers? It's James Prigioni coming to you live from Jersey. Just because it's December and the cold weather is here doesn't mean we're done growing. So today I want to show you what I'm still growing in my garden and how you can grow food through the winter too. Let's go! Now that winter is only a couple weeks away, the temperatures have really dropped here in Jersey. I'm in zone 7A, so in the coldest parts of the winter, it gets down to the single digits Fahrenheit. And already this year, we've had a few days where it's been in the low 20s, but that hasn't stopped me and Tuck from growing some delicious food. So today, I want to highlight 3 key factors that has allowed us to grow food this late into the year and allowing us to grow food continually through the whole winter. The first and probably the most important factor with growing veggies through the winter has to do with choosing the right veggies to grow. So the idea is to grow the most cold hardy veggies. And today, I want to share with you some of my favorite cold hardy veggies, not just for their ability to tolerate that cold temperature, but also for their flavor. My first and favorite, probably the most cold hardy of them all, is tatsoi. This right here is a Nebraska family. It's got very tight leaves and an incredibly sweet flavor at this time of the year as the temperatures start to drop. It's succulent and just so good. Another veggie that I love so much too is the claytonia, which is one right here. It's got these small leaves. They have a bit of like a lemony flavor, a succulent one also, and just overall very, very cold hardy, just like the tatsoi. The tatsoi and the claytonia, I've eaten these after snow has come, and these grow all year for me without any covering basically. Now I want to bring you over to another uncommon veggie that you may not have heard of that many times, but it's super cold hardy, just like the tatsoi and the claytonia. Another great thing about the tatsoi too is that it grows pretty quick at this time of the year. Even though the temperatures have dropped a lot and we're not getting as much sun, it still thrives in this kind of weather. Over here we've got one that grows, again, just a little bit slower than some of the other two. Right here is the mashi. Like I mentioned, it grows a little slower than the tatsoi or the claytonia, but this one is another super cold hardy plant that will grow without any covering through the winter where I live in Jersey. Right next to me over here too, we've got some arugula. I've got some larger arugula plants I'll show you later, but this right here is an arugula. It's got an incredibly nutty flavor, super cold hardy, but when it comes to growing arugula and kale too, which I'll show you, you want to make sure that you're growing the right varieties. So just because you are growing the right kind of plant, that's not just the end of it. You want to make sure you're growing the right variety also, because that arugula over there, there's some varieties that are bred specifically for growing through the winter and some that are bred specifically for growing in the spring and summer because they'll bolt late. So I've got some ice bred arugula growing right there. That's great for the winter. Then there's some other varieties like the rocket, which will grow well in the spring and summer, but aren't gonna last as late into the winter. The same thing goes for the kale. Right here, I've got some ragged jack kale, also called red Russian kale, and I've got white Russian kale I'll show you too. These are some of the most cold hardy kales of all the kale varieties. So it goes back to not only choosing the right plant, but also the right variety. The same thing goes for the spinach too. So over here we're growing some different kinds of spinach, but when I grow spinach in the winter, I like growing varieties like the giant winter spinach because it's bred, again, to grow well in the winter, as opposed to growing like the Avon spinach, which is bred mainly to have really good heat tolerance and to not bolt early in the season once it starts to get really warm. Those were only about 6 cold hardy veggies, and there's plenty more, but I just wanted to share those with you because those are some of my favorite ones and they're some of the most cold hardy ones. So if you're gonna grow things through the winter, I suggest you use those as kind of like foundational ones, then add some other cold hardy plants as, you know, bonuses. You'll notice mostly all the ones I mentioned are leafy greens, and that's because as the sun starts to wane and we've got less hours of sunlight and the temperatures drop, things grow much slower. So the leafy greens are a great thing to grow because they just thrive in that kind of situation. So there's some other things that I am growing too, like I'll show you right here. I've got some root crops like radishes because they'll grow relatively quick and be ready to harvest. So I've got a few different varieties right here, along with some carrots I have that I planted early too. But you'll notice I've got some radishes that I just planted not long ago, and we're getting some nice little harvest from them. So some yellow radishes, some zlotin ones, some pink radishes. Looks like Tuck wants to check these out. See if he wants to try a little radish. He usually likes the radishes. He usually likes snacking on these radishes. I do too, especially at this time of the year when the temperatures start to get really cold, the ground gets cold, and it makes things much sweeter. So some things you may not even like in the in the late spring or early summer because they're getting a little bit bitter. At this time of the year, they're pretty good. So you can see Tuck's already coming back for second bites. He enjoys these ones, and so do I. So this is one of the ones we're growing that's not a leafy green. But if you remember back in October, I also planted out some brassicas, like some cabbages, and I've harvested a number of the quick crop cabbages already, but I still have some ones that took a little longer that I'm harvesting right now. So I'm gonna go grab a calabash cabbage right now. You can come over with me. I also talked about how the first expected frost date that you're gonna go by is just a guide. It's not something set in stone. So we noticed that our frost date came a little late, and even with the frost, if you have large established plants like this, then you'll be able to grow past some really cold temperatures. So I'm gonna grab this cabbage right here. It's not the biggest cabbage, but it's definitely a treat for this time of year to be able to have some fresh cabbages and harvest them, even like I mentioned when the temperatures drop down to the 20. So this thing is gonna be so delicious. Little calabash cabbage right there. So again, the things I mentioned, those 6 crops, those are just the suggestions that will be great foundational things, but you can grow things bonus as long as you time them right, which I'll get into a little more as the video progresses. So choosing the right plants is the first key factor to growing all winter long, and the second most important factor has to do with using season extension methods, something like a hoop house, a cold frame, or even row covers. A lot of the plants that I previously mentioned, well, a few of them like the tatsoi, the Russian kales, and the claytonia, even the mashi, those things will grow all winter with little to no covering. But if you want to grow other things, like say the mizuna we have right here, or some of the red sorrel like we have here, or even some of these lettuces, and maybe even some of the cilantros. If you want to grow those all through the winter, then you might have to use something like a hinged hoop house, because they may not survive those temperatures that dip really, really low. Well, at least where I live here, and it gets really cold. My favorite season extension method happens to be the hinged hoop house for a number of reasons. One of the reasons I love it is because you're able to prop it open like this on pretty nice days. This way you can allow good airflow, and on days where it's, you know, in the 30s, 40s, you can keep it open like I have here. And what this does is allows the plants to grow short and stocky, and this makes them more cold hardy. So if I just had this closed all the time and there wasn't much airflow, we'd have that greenhouse effect, but it would get very warm in there. And as a result of that, the plants would get tall and lanky, making them weaker overall. Another great thing about this hoop house is that I can add multiple layers to it. So now that the temperatures are starting to drop, it's going to be in the 20s for the next couple days, I'm going to be adding this second layer onto the hoop house. And what will happen is with each layer, it'll move me up 1.5 zones. So I'll go from growing in zone 7A to zone 10A. And that little gap I'll have in between the two will act as a form of insulation, that airspace between. The reason I haven't put the second layer on just yet, and I delay it as much as I can, is because with each additional layer, that's going to allow less sunlight to come in. So with the days shortening and not that much sunlight as it is, we don't want to reduce more sunlight by adding that second layer too early. Another thing that I love about the hinged hoop houses is that they're multifunctional. So late in the fall, before you have the plastic on, you could put a row cover on the top. Then as it starts to get colder out and the temperatures really dip, you can get plastic on like this. Then when spring and early summer come, you can put an insect net over the top by just removing the plastic, because you already have this frame. Then after you have the insect netting on and it gets really hot into the summer, you can put a shade cloth on the top. So as the seasons change, the function of this hoop house can change as well, so you're not just stuck with one scenario. You'll notice in here, we've got a bunch of different things growing. Some lettuces that are looking beautiful. Again, some more of the mashi, which we love planting, some claytonia, some cilantro, and even some yucchina savoy over there, and some hardy kale here. So we've got this nice birdie's raised bed here, and even though it's a steel bed, we still built a little hoop house for that. So you don't just have to have a wooden raised bed if you want to take advantage of one of these season extension methods like a hoop house. And like I said, it's multifunctional, and that's one of the things we love about when we're permaculturists. We love the idea of using multiple functions for one thing and getting the most out of it. The third key factor to growing veggies through the winter has to do with proper timing. You want to make sure your veggies are transplanted and established and growing before the cold weather really starts to set in. Freshly transplanted veggies that have just gone in the ground are weaker and less cold hardy than the bigger, more established veggies right here. I know timing can be a little bit difficult when it comes to the fall garden and winter garden, because you've got some summer veggies that are still in the ground that you're getting some good production from. So what I suggest you do is staggering planting a little bit. Plant 2 rounds of fall crops. You'll notice over here, On this side, where I had some of the summer veggies, I pulled those out relatively early. Got this stuff in the ground and allowed it to grow and get more established. This way I knew I was going to get a good harvest out of these things, even if the cold weather came really early. On this side, I allowed my summer veggies to grow later into the season and planted a second round of fall crops and winter crops. This way I can make sure that if the weather stayed nice and wasn't super cold really early, then I can grow the stuff like I am here. So now these things are established and they'll be able to grow through the winter, which is really excellent. Then on my other bed, I want to show you over here, my pallet raised bed. I've got some stuff that I planted early in the fall too, like some monster kale plants. Look at the size of this 1,000 head kale. That's what they call it. It's got these massive leaves and it's cold hardy too. You can see this thing's gonna produce a good amount of food. I'll be eating this late into the season. I've also got some really established red Russian kale over here. So this was a bed I planted my fall crops relatively early, guaranteeing myself that harvest, because I know that they're gonna last pretty long into the winter because they're well established and well grown. I even planted some things maybe a little too late into the season, but hey, I figured it'd be worth it. Some celery. I've got some celery planted here and it's survived relatively well. It's not the biggest celery that you'll ever see, but the flavor is just amazing, especially when it's got nice and cold like this. Not bitter, super sweet, great flavor. So like I mentioned, you want to stagger your plantings a little bit. Plant at least 2 rounds of fall crops, in my opinion, to guarantee yourself that harvest by having big established plants when the cold weather comes. But also plant some stuff late, because you never know when the frost is actually going to come or how late you can grow into the season. In the fall, I encourage all of you to extend your growing season as far as you possibly can, and to use your first expected frost date as a guide, not as a law or something that's set in stone. So I hope some of you broke out of the mindset that you can only grow during the growing season, and hopefully some of you are still harvesting delicious veggies this late into the season like me and Tuck. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you're taking this time, at this time of the year to not only be growing things, but also looking back at some of your notes, some of your journal, and investing some of the time you have now into next spring. This way you can grow more food. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share it with your friends. Don't forget to check out the merch down low. And remember, whenever you're on Amazon, start your shopping with our Amazon affiliate link. Tuck and James will be back at you again real soon. We